And hello good people of the internet, it is I, Tommy Kelly, and this is Adventures in Woo Woo. And in this episode, we're back in Rahatska, and I'm going to talk about a magical working I did, which I've called the Stations of Yo Cross. But in my case, well, it's the Stations of My Cross. But that doesn't work as a video title, so the Stations of Yo Cross. And welcome back to Rahatska. It's woodland. I don't think it's quite designated a forest. I don't know what the switch over between woods and a forest is exactly, but I'm sure there's a technical one. Man-made woods beside a lake, which I think is also man-made. So does the man-made factor make it less magical? I don't think so. I find it quite magical, this place here. And there's some trees that are older than 200 years old here, it says on a sign, which is older than some countries. So, I mean, it's certainly not to be ignored, that whole fact of that it is, while not ancient, is not new. Well, I suppose maybe 200 years is quite new in tree terms. But anyway, enough of this rambling. What I want to mention today, I want to talk about, is a thing that's been going on, or I've been doing for the last while. And I've labelled it the Stations of Your Cross, because it's trying to come up with something cool to call it, but also because it seems apt and seems right. It's something that I found myself doing a number of times, unbeknownst to myself, and then once I kind of realised I was doing it, I engaged with it and continued to do it. So what is it, you say? Well, it's the best way I can describe it is I'll start how it happened. The first time I noticed this thing happening was I was just out for a kind of a drive, and I was trying to find a place to do a video and somewhere quiet, whatever. And I noticed that I was just close to my hometown, Dundalk, which is not that weird because I live not that far from it anyway. And I decided I'd go in, and the only place I could get parked was close to a place where I used to live. So I said, I'll go down and have a look at that place. And then I was in, and not in the place, but I could get in the back gardens. It was a pub, a venue I used to live above, and it was one of the places where I used to do some of the very first gigs when I was a musician, and it was an important part of my life because it was where I first got in around certain people that would shape my outlook for a number of years in that whole kind of music scene. And lots of kind of stuff happened there, lots of firsts in that place, and lots of I don't know, try not to give too much away about my life because it's mine, not for yours, not for you. But lots of things happened, so very significant kind of place that I was in. And then while I was there, I went to the church that's around the corner, chapel, whatever it is. And that was the church that I would have gone to when I was a kid with my family and stuff like that. And we would have been asked every week to come up and do, give up the offerings and stuff like that. So it's kind of significant in that. But it's also significant because it was the church that then was part of the school that I went to. The Marist in Dundalk, and that was obviously my secondary school was a place that's very significant for me, and again lots of firsts, lots of things, and it's a place that my reoccurring dreams are set in an awful lot, particularly my anxiety dreams of you have an exam tomorrow and you haven't studied, which I get every couple of months, which I assume most people get those type of things, but even non-anxiety dreams or different things happen in that building. Nothing to do with school, nothing to do with any of those things. So I kind of noticed that I had been visiting places from my past, and I had been listening to a podcast that RuneSuit podcast that Gordon White was interviewing Paul Weston, and he was talking about the kind of synchronicities between different times in your life and how reading a book at one time and then reading it again at the same time of the year 5 years later seems to have a kind of an impact on the world or your consciousness. And I also remember Gordon talking about it when he was moving from London back to Australia or to New Zealand. Not New Zealand, where does he live? Tasmania. Sorry Gordon. That's like me confusing Ireland and England, and I would give that to people for doing that, so ignore that. So, and he was talking about that him and his partner went back to places where there had been, where when they first came to London, you know, went to the same type of markets, the same type of places, and it seemed to have a resonance thing going on. And when I read that post, and that's from a number of years ago, I also remember doing similar things when I would start new relationships, particularly the relationship with my wife now, where at the beginning it seemed like almost as if I was erasing previous relationships by going to places or doing things that I would have done that were kind of significant with previous partners or whatever, in a sense overwriting these things. So there was a resonance involved there too. So all of this was kind of in my head, and goes, right, I'm going to fully engage with this. I'm going to start doing this. And the reason why I call it the Stations of the Cross is because in the Catholic, I assume it's just Catholic, I don't know, religion, there's this idea that I think there's 12 Stations of the Cross. Don't answer any pub quiz with that knowledge. But it's where you go around particular points of the crucifixion and different points, and you say a prayer at each of them. So it's like kind of significant points that you mark in a row. So I went, right, so this will be the Stations of my cross, and I'll go to all the places and do all the things that were significant to me in my life up to now, with the kind of idea that if I do that, it'll have some sort of resonance, some sort of movement, and it will affect some sort of change, or at least end something. Because what I had been going through, and a lot of my kind of shadow work and meditation, coming out of that Reiki stuff that I was doing, it felt like there was an ending approaching, or some sort of conclusion, some sort of end of a cycle, or some sort of some sort of ending. That's the best. There's some sort of depletion, all that stuff I talked about, the depletion and all that. It seemed like it was coming to an end. And this felt like a kind of a fitting thing. And it was almost, when I started going around these places in these different areas, it almost felt like I was saying goodbye, to the point I was going, hold on, am I going to die? And I said to my sister, like, you know, when you think about people who died suddenly, and you go, oh, I wonder did they know? And I kind of go, well, if I die in the next couple of weeks, I knew, you know. But of course, I don't think that it's because I've now slightly come past it. I don't feel I'm going to die, but I feel part of me is going to die in the whole sense of, you know, death and rebirth, and we're continually in that kind of cycle. So a couple of the places I went to were the different places where I lived, and one of them in particular was kind of when we lived there. I lived there with a friend of mine when I was quite young, and I was about 20, 21. I had my 21st birthday party, bonfire in the back garden. One of those, which incidentally I've just another kind of little sync has come up that won't mean anything to you, but it does to me, so that's interesting. Just about someone whose name came up in a Reiki session, who also will be connected to this house. In a good way, it was a nice thing. So it was like, when I went out to see it, it was like this cottage, a small wee kind of cottage, and it was a pretty dark time for me, a very dark time, because I'd removed myself from my entire friends. That kind of scene that I had been involved in, that I talked about from when I was in the music scene and in that living above the pub and playing and all that kind of thing. I kind of had removed myself from that entire situation because it become quite toxic. And I kind of, although I am definitely an introvert and like time on my own, I definitely secluded myself at this point. I kept deliberately away from people in a bad way, not in a kind of a regenerative way, but in a hiding away type of thing. And it was where the first puka, the cat, arrived, and loads of things. But anyway, when I went out there, it had got a completely new facelift. It had totally been renovated, totally been added on to, extended. Looked wonderful. I was kind of, that's interesting that, in a sense, that's how also I kind of feel about myself since then, that I've been renovated, I've been extended onto, I've had a new lease in life, and it's you know, it's kind of symbolic shadowing of from a house to my life as well. So it kind of made me very pleased that had happened, but also quite shocked in a way. And I went to other houses, I went to where I lived and stuff like that. But one of the big ones, what I did is, when I was about, I think 12, I went to a disco with some friends of mine. A disco, man, they're showing my age. Went to a dance, whatever it's called these days. And I was in a kind of a dodgy enough area of the town that I lived in. And anyway, long story short, we got pulled out, and me and two of my friends got kind of accosted by this large gang of ruffians. And my two friends, for their sins, ran off and left me behind, and I got pretty badly beaten up. And all I remember is my head being kind of bashed off, like steel railings and stuff like that. And then when I was let go and eventually caught up with my other two friends, and they started giving out to me saying that if I tell anyone about this, that I'll get in trouble and get them in trouble. And it was all kind of horrible and nasty and very distressing. And I spent a long time after that, months, years after, being very afraid of going outside and afraid of people and afraid of open spaces. And I'm pretty sure that most of my social anxiety stems from that kind of thing. So I went back to the scene of the crime, and it was quite powerful and quite interesting in many ways. It didn't feel like a crime scene, or it didn't feel like a place I didn't want to go to. It just felt like another place, but it definitely seemed to have some sort of resonance and some significance. And I couldn't find the exact place where it happened, because how could you? But it was definitely in the area. And so I left an offering and had a chat and just tried to release that kind of thing. And so that was kind of the big one. Another one was kind of going around different it's like different churches. At one point I just seemed I had to go to these 4 churches, and that seemed part of it. It would have been 4 churches that I would have been in growing up, and it was to light a candle in each one of these. And I don't really understand that exactly, but it seemed part of it or whatever. So over the course, and I'm leaving out stuff, not out of trying to hide stuff, just I can't remember all of these things. When you're trying to talk to people, of course, there's some slip out of your mind, and 10 minutes after I record a video goes, oh, remember that was the most important one that you didn't talk about. So I'm sure there's other bits. But that was the idea, is to go round to the significant parts of your life, to make a visit to the significant parts of your life. And maybe it won't be in the way I've done it, where to say goodbye. That's a felt goodbye. I don't know what that is. That is yet to fully unpack. But it's to acknowledge and to try and shift some of the energy from these things. If you want to go from like a soul retrieval point of view, that would suggest in shamanism, I understand that's a problematic word and all that, but in kind of Western shamanism, there's this idea of soul retrieval where in the pretty rough points of your life, or significant points or traumatic points of your life, you leave a part of your energy or your soul behind at these spots. And maybe going around doing the stations of your cross is a way of retrieving, a soul retrieving kind of exercise, where you try to take back your energy that you had left at that point. So that place where I had been beaten up, that there's a lot of me I left there. And you don't have to even engage it in a woo way, like psychologically there's a lot of me stuck in that place. And it's trying to let go of these things. And I found it very healing. I found it very a lot of closure from it. I found it did, like, I can't get past the fact that it did feel like, in a sense, I was dying, but no, that's not it. I can't really describe that without it sounding wrong. It's like the end. It felt like the end, but I don't know what the end of what. So I don't think there's anything else I can say on that other than try and pick a couple, at least 10 of your most significant parts in your life. And if you live in a different country, in a different place, Google map them, or do some representation of them, do some journeying around it, or any of those things, and try and hit these significant points and try and visit them, or have some representation of them, because I think there's something in it. I think it does shift energy, and to go full woo-woo, I think it does affect reality. And I think from having done it, I can notice particular blockages and different small little blockages in different areas seem to just come through, and no longer blocking it, that the flow kind of went on them again, just kind of that was allowed, as if this had opened some sort of door or something to it. I'm getting very out there, I understand, but I've noticed that in other ways as well, that when you try and fix one problem and do successfully fix one problem or acknowledge a problem, that in other areas the energy seems to flow, man. But a couple of things happened significant after doing it that seemed connected to the whole thing, and there's a few things that I'm expecting will probably happen out of it, which will be interesting to see if that comes out of it. Without, like, say, I'm expecting to have contact or with a particular person who I haven't seen in 20 years from having done this work, because I think it will bring up certain things, and it's a recurring theme, and I think it'll put it to bed, if you want. So that's it, the stations of your cross. Remember I said I was going to forget the most important one. It's not the most important one, but it's one, and it's one I went back to and filmed again recently. So I'm going to show you some footage. It'll either be at the beginning or over as I talk, of this place called Ladywell Shrine. And it's interesting. This is obviously a shrine to the BVM, or the Blessed Virgin Mary, that miraculously the waters raise once every year on a particular day. Some people say it's the fire engine coming to pump in the water. I'm not so cynical. I've never been, because the crowds are just unbelievable. When you get to there, you get nowhere near. But it's very popular, and people really, really are into it and find it. It's like a very local kind of Fatima or Lourdes. Probably not as powered, but that kind of idea. And that was the first place that I remember the Black Dog ever being part of my life. It's that I've talked for the depression thing, whatever. It was when my parents were splitting up, and it's either to have or I just know that they are. And I went there and I sat under this tree, this oak tree. There's a willow tree there, which is interesting. And I was devastated and just didn't know what to do. And it was the first kind of time that I jailbroke, in a sense, Catholicism for myself, in that I knew this place was a holy place. But I also knew that it wasn't the rules that had been kind of bound up with it and used within the kind of Catholic structure weren't what I wanted to use it for. And so I didn't. And I used it for my own kind of, in a sense, witchy ways, or jailbroken ways, as Gordon White would say. And so going back to that, the very first time I went back, there was a guy talking on his phone very loudly, and it was very profane, the entire place, and it just didn't work for me. And I had to go back again. And that's when I did the filming that'll be accompanying this talk. Very significant point, and it's surrounded by kind of more significant places. I lived in a house not far from it at a completely different time in my life, which is also a significant. As I said before to you, I've lived in a lot of places, but I didn't go to visit all of them. I went just to the significant ones. Some of them were just places I stayed for a while, but that was another significant one. And the whole area, it was a very kind of somber kind of thing. But that thing of the BVM, I think had something to do with the 4 churches that I had to go to, because it was the 4 statues of Our Lady that is where I lit the candles, which seems most fitting or whatever. So there was something in that. I don't know, but yeah. So that was the other significant place. Again, I probably had one other one that I wanted to mention but didn't. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. No, we're getting not ahead of ourselves. We're getting too long in this. This is becoming a long video, and my point has been made. So we'll wrap up once again. Hopefully I'll finish this time. Find significant points in your life. Find something that represents them. If you can get to these places, go to these places and make a pilgrimage out of the whole thing, and have it as stations of your cross, and see if it breaks through, or if it unplugs things, if it allows more flow, if you get some closure, if you get to say goodbye to some things, if you're able to move on, and all those things, and see if it does anything for you. And I'll leave the podcasts of Paul Weston talking about this, and if I can find the blog post, it could have been a Tarl, of Gordon White talking about leaving London and visiting these places, I'll do that as well. So that's it, the stations of your cross. Until our next adventure, be well.